Like, how do we get to that place as black men where we feel safe, vulnerable enough to say we want to, witness and affirm this other person's humanity without feeling that it makes us less than?
Right. Again, like, it's funny how much stuff I see on Twitter, but I once saw a tweet that said something like, before marriage, everyone should go through therapy and make sure you fix your shit before you bring in a new life and all that stuff, right? And I think in order for you to get to that point where you can actually like recognize healthy love, I guess, because like you made it like a really great point about like some people have a view on love that is like maybe not the best, and like it's hard to identify with what seems to be obvious love because that is not what they're used to. So it's like, I guess, getting yourself to a point where you are better at identifying what it should be versus what you were raised on, or like what you thought it should be, is definitely a key. Because like, of course, how are you going to know how to love somebody else if you can't love yourself, right? Like they say it all the time. Shout out RuPaul. But yeah, because it's like you definitely do need to somehow get that sense of like self-love and everything, and like recognize it in yourself before you can recognize it in somebody else. So I would say that is like a key component. If you're at a stage where you don't really know what love should be, then you kind of do need to like realize that on your own, because it's almost unfair for you to try and rope somebody in and like have them teach you and somehow also supply the love at the same time. It's almost too much to put on one person. Yeah.
Emotional labor. What are you saying, Folarin?
I'm a little taken aback. I don't take it back, it's not the right way to say it, but like, you can only love others when you love yourself, right? It was what you were saying. Which takes me back to your earlier point about love as sacrifice. But then as soon as you said that, I was like, love is acceptance. So which one is it?
Yeah.
Like which one is it? Cause can it be both? But when you said love as sacrifice, when you were describing, love being in place, getting yourself to a point where you're like, you know what, I can sacrifice this so this person I love can X, Y, Z. And I kind of heard that and I was like, ugh. Because like, again, this guy that I read is like, love can only exist in freedom. It was like, that was his whole thing. And I hear that and I'm like, if you're making sacrifices, then you're not free.
Right.
So is that really love?
Ooh.
Fair.
Bro.
Great.
Right?
Great question. Great question, man.
So then I'm like, I'm looking at that, and then you said you can only love yourself, and I'm thinking about acceptance, and then I'm thinking sacrifice, and I'm thinking freedom. I'm like asking, am I free to accept myself?
Right.
Because if I'm free to accept myself, then I'm loving myself, and then I can then love you in that same way. So I think it's all kind of connected.
Yeah.
I just got it twisted a little.
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. They're all connected, and somehow they all need to coexist. Because they can't really exist independently. They all somehow need to fit together, even though they seem like they don't really match up. But I think the thing about the sacrifice part is it's not always something as obvious as like, oh, I have to lose something today. I have to not, achieve this goal, and I need to focus on doing this. It's not necessarily a thing of like a big, I need to actually lose something. It's just kind of, I think if you think about it realistically, it's a reality of life. Like for you to wake up in the morning and like make breakfast for somebody else, that's like a sacrifice of your time, right? It's not necessarily a thing of like, I've had to lose a limb or something, but it's like you've still kind of given up something. You've given up some form of comfort for yourself for somebody else, right? You've gone the extra mile to do that. And I think that like by design, like even just like doing something like going out and getting somebody else a gift, like that's a sacrifice of your money, right? It's like, it might not be much depending on what it is, but it's like, it's something that you probably wouldn't have spent if you were on your own. If you didn't have somebody else to care for, you wouldn't have done that. But now you've gone the extra mile and done that. So you are still making sacrifices by design, by just like interacting in this love thing. At the same time, yeah, there's freedom, but it's like, you don't want to be like, oh, I'm free, I'm going to just do whatever, and I only care about myself. Like there's like, I guess it's almost a sacrifice of that entire freedom, and that I can't just wake up and do whatever I want to do. I have another person that I need to care about. So that is like that kind of like codependence on those two properties as well. So I guess like they all kind of coexist in some way, and we just need to naturally come to a balance.
Yo, that was a very heavy hitting point. That like sacrifice, acceptance, freedom, like man, because that like it sucks when someone sacrifices something for you in the name of love and then hoards it over you. Right? Like,
It's not.
Yeah, it's not.
It's
right.
not. Then you're not now free, right?
Yeah.
Because you're now bound to this person's.
It's true.
What should have been a selfless act.
Yeah.
But now it's like, dude, like, are you like, what the hell? Like, why am I like? Why does this feel like change, bro?
Why does it feel like?
Like, so
Yeah.
I want to go to the love for self as black men. Sacrifice, acceptance, freedom. Like, I'm going to make this a little bit more personal in terms of work that I'm doing for myself, right? Like, to be able to, like, this period I'm in right now in life is hard because I've forced myself to be still. And, like, by that I mean to stop looking to outside sources as a place of refuge, as a place of like where I should be able to be breathing and like getting life from, because it often means that I come back home to me and all those problems are still there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so the sacrifice is going through that tough period of staying still. Like the other day I was thinking about it, it's like it feels like standing in the middle of a storm in the ocean and having all the waves constantly hit and saying like, you know what, like this is gonna pass. Like I'll be better for it once, as opposed to just like dipping. I'm like, I don't want to deal with these problems today.
Yeah.
Cool. So now I've made that sacrifice for myself. But within doing that, like so many things start to come up for me, right? Like, cause I'm like, shit, man, all these behaviors I've been running away from, all these patterns, like all these like, things, like, damn, man, it's all like falling down at the same time. But like, there is so much acceptance of self that is needed during that period.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not just from me, because sometimes, man, like, the negative self-talk is louder than I can, like, turn the volume down, right? Like, sometimes I'm just like, so, like, I also, when I talked about being able to call up a friend and having the love from a friend to be able to say, yo, like, I know, like, what you're thinking sucks right now, but, like, I affirm you, like all the bad parts of you are still okay, right? Like, and having that acceptance from other people is a beautiful thing. And I think about, like, never feeling like I could be vulnerable enough to tell anybody about those bad parts or tell myself, because it meant having to deal with them and having to deal with the fear of not being accepted for them. And then if I can get through that period and the waves calm down, then that's when like the freedom starts to hit, where I can do this sacrificial part for myself over and over again, and it doesn't feel like I'm doing such a hard thing. Like, it feels freeing because I'm like, you know what, I need to do this.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool, like, it's better for me. And so if I now think my relationship with black women, I need to make sacrifices, but I shouldn't be reminding myself that it's sacrifice.
Yeah,
Like,
it shouldn't feel like a sacrifice.
I need to get to the point where it feels freeing
Yeah.
to do this thing for you,
Yeah.
whether it's a romantic gesture or it's just the simple act of letting you know that I see you. Like, your struggles as a black woman, even though they're not my experiences, are extremely real and okay, right? Like, I'm not shutting them down, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, when do we get to that point, right? Like, and are we okay with letting ourselves sit in the waves? And like the same way we want white people to hear and, you know, reflect on racism constantly, are we willing to do that for ourselves and for the people we claim to care for?
Right.
That was what I took from that sacrifice. I was just like, all these things are like,
You put it in a circle so nice, man.
Yep.
Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. Because from the sacrifice, you learn to accept, and then from acceptance comes that freedom.
Yep.
Whew. Jesus.
shout out to who's the author?
Anthony DeMello,
Yeah,
bro.
whatever,
Go buy his
man.
book.
Shout out to that guy, man.
That's incredible. You're asking all these questions about why don't we do that, or how do we get to the point of this, and like initially I was going to connect it back to society, and one of the main questions we wanted to ask today is like, what do you see as love? And I think the reality is, even though we're here having this conversation, most of the black men in our lives do not see what we're talking about right now as love. You know, what we see as love is what we were raised with.
Right. Yeah.
I hate to blame put blame on a previous
it's reality.
relationship, but it's just kind of like love as service, love as all these other things that really do not connect to what you're talking about right now, right? So it's like it's until, at least for me, it was until a catastrophic moment in my life where I was like, oh, I have to sit and take these waves, bro. Like, it's so fascinating you said this still thing, because I can remember the day I looked my friends in the eye and said, I don't know how to be still. Like, I just don't know how to sit and take it. And like, I needed to learn that, right? And it's from there, like, all of these like lessons and like this stuff come from, right? So it's until we face something terrible. That's why I told my younger brother, but we need to get you this heartbreak quick. like get it out of the way early so that all the lessons can come afterwards, right? It's terrible advice, but for me it was the reality of life, right? So you ask these questions about how do we, I'm like, some of you guys gotta get their heart broken, bro, but then the violence comes out of that too.
Yeah, potentially, you're right. Yeah, that's true.
I wonder if like it also depends on who's around you when these life changes happen. 100%. Like, who are the man them around you? Like, who are also the women around you? Like, who are the people around you when you go through such a like tumultuous period in your life where you can either act in a violent manner or like you can decide that fine, I'm not taking that route. Yeah, who helps you along that path? Because we can't do it by ourselves. It's not an easy thing to do by yourself. Violence is so much easier.
Yeah, it's natural.
It's so much easier, man. Anger is so much easier. Like, it's like
true.
Yeah, so like, who has been around you to say, Marcus, I love you enough to not let you choose violence or anger?
Right. So I think first, even going back a little bit, kind of to your point about like not wanting to blame older generations, but also acknowledging that it's true, right? When you kind of start off in the world as like a baby or like whatever, right? Like, you don't know anything, literally, right? Your entire reliance of knowledge is on what the people who were here before you are going to teach you, or like what they're going to transfer onto you and like just make you consider to be normal. So definitely the way that you're raised, the things that you're taught are love, are kind of the things that you go on in life and like believe. And it's kind of like, there comes that period where it's like you're willing to make that sacrifice for yourself and say, okay, you know what, like I need to stop and like actually fix this and like get through this entire period. You value yourself enough to say, I'm going to do this for myself, right? You're willing to do this because you think it's a good investment in your number one priority, yourself. And you go forward and you do that. But then the thing is that you're still kind of spending so much time on learning before you start like trying to learn something new, right? So I think we do have a huge responsibility, and like we can identify these things and know where it's coming from, because we do need to acknowledge that it is coming from somewhere. And our job should be going forward trying to make it so that whoever comes next doesn't have to first go through that period of unlearning. Let's actually start off on a much better, a much better start, and like actually grow from there. Because even through the unlearning, then you realize what the problem is, you fix it, then there's a whole period of growth. And like, if that period of growth started much earlier, you could be much further along in your journey at this point in time.
Facts.
So it's kind of like a waste of time, but it's like definitely acknowledging that, this is kind of where this thing came from. As far as like people around me personally, I think it's hard because I've been lucky enough to actually, I am in a relationship. I'm lucky enough to be in one for like a few years now, at a point where I do recognize this person as an individual who has chosen to make sacrifices. I see the sacrifices every day, right? It's like, people are not easy to be with. Like, nobody is like easy to just, I'm just gonna, whatever, no effort whatsoever. But it's like the constant willingness to continue that relationship and to keep it going and to just be present all the time, like through whatever. Like, when you get to a point where you're vulnerable with your partner, where you can talk about literally anything, you fully appreciate that, because like there's nothing that's going to happen that I'm not going to be able to tell my girlfriend or like discuss with her. So having that security, having that person has definitely been like a huge aspect of like getting through this entire thing. So that has definitely been a huge rock for me. And I think just generally, like, obviously people always kind of lean on family because that's kind of like the default, right? Like, family is always around, but family relationships are not always, clear cut or like clean or anything. There typically are problems, but just kind of focusing on kind of like breaking it down from the bigger family to even just like your siblings. Like, okay, well, here's my sister, or like a younger sibling, for example, like my little sister is like, these are people that I care about, that I want to protect and I want to do better for. So even without having them support me, like I want to be stronger for them. And in that sense, like, you kind of build that community of like, you know, friends, people that you see that you just kind of want better for the other person, and like transferring that selflessness that you would, you know, make that sacrifice for yourself to be better, and like seeing somebody else as valuable enough to make that sacrifice for them as well.
Do you have points?
I was just taking that.
Okay. Willingness. I love that you mentioned willingness to sacrifice. And what do you think you have to give in return to maintain your partner's willingness? Because willingness can run out.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, like I said, I think human beings are not designed to be alone. You know, I just feel like it's a fact. I think that people just kind of need other people, regardless of what you think. So what am I giving to keep that willingness? I think it's like, it has to be a thing of reciprocating the same sacrifices, or like love, basically. If somebody's willing to do whatever X and Y for me, then I should be willing to do the exact same thing for them. It has to be a thing of an even share, 50-50. And that is kind of where the problems with like patriarchy come in, where like men feel entitled to like, maybe I'll get 80%, 70% of the share. Like, I want some higher percentage of this relationship than the other person, or the other person deserves less. When you truly value the other person and you're willing to see yourselves as equal, as like both people, I mean, like, you're getting into a commitment for an extended period of time, you know, like however long that's going to be. It's some period of time of your lifetime that you'll never get back. You're both sacrificing, betting on this relationship, or like willing to invest in this relationship. If you can actually recognize that somebody else is doing this thing for you, a person, an individual who could have easily done something else, it's like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to keep you happy because you keep me happy. But it has to be a give and take. It has to be a 50-50 thing. You have to be willing to do that. And in doing so, like, you just naturally, you see someone willing to do this for you. Okay, well, I'm willing to do this for you. This is the things that you like. I'm going to do the things you like because you do the things that I like. And it just has to be a give and take, I think.
Was it ever hard to, like, in the beginning or at any point in time, to be as willing?
I think it's definitely foreign in the beginning, right? Because like, it's not something you're kind of prepared for. And growing up in this age where you're exposed to like so many opinions online and social media, there's kind of like a pre-wiring to the way you think and the way you approach things. It's like, even when you get on Twitter and like back in the day when it first started happening, when people were always like, men are trash. Like, in the beginning, I used to be offended by it, not necessarily because I was disagreeing with it, but because it was like, am I trash? Like, am I inevitably going to be trash? Like, it kind of was like a predestined, you know, label. It was like, no matter what, all men are going to fall into this, you know, category eventually. Like, it's just a matter of time. So I think like, but obviously over time, I see that completely differently now. I see it as like the same way, like, I'll be like, yo, white people are racist. Not every white person is racist, but obviously majority enough of white people are racist that like that broad blanket statement is true. So that is like different there. But I think like in the beginning, like you kind of, it's foreign, so it's like, it's kind of hard to accept at first. It's kind of weird because your idea of a relationship is not really that 50-50. You're trying to get there, but that is not where you start off because you've been told that it's not supposed to be 50-50. You're growing up in a world where every example of, well, not every, but like probably most examples of this love that you've seen haven't exactly been 50-50. It's been a man and it's been a woman for those heterosexual relationships. And, you know, it's like, definitely there's an adjustment period, and I would say it's definitely hard in the beginning. But I think that's why it's really important to work on yourself first, like I said before, and actually identify that this might be a problem for me and this is how I'm going to go in and tackle this thing. Because I think not many people take the idea of relationships seriously enough to make that commitment ahead of time and like do that work ahead of time before you get into it. People kind of jump in and like think, I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
You don't always get the time to do that, right?
Oof. You don't always get the time. Regrets. I'm alive.
Not a single word.
Oh man, yo, that like, I love, you know, saying that generally the models of relationship that we see don't exist in like even playing fields, right? We see oppression, so we model oppression.
Literally,
And so that's what makes it initially hard in the beginning, and sometimes that difficulty like wrecks the rest of the relationship. You're just maybe unwilling or just like not seeing what should be or could be different. And like I'm just thinking like going forward, like are we able to maintain more of a even playing field, like to be able to model that so that like people coming after us don't have to go through that again, like because it's not cool, it's not fun.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody enjoys that period, right? If you do, man,
Trouble.
get that checked out.
Can I say something to that regard? Because like if we're talking about what we're doing moving forward, or like how you create change, or how you balance things out and whatnot. Like I've heard the arguments that like if things are one way at an extreme, which I would say that's kind of like where we are right now, right? Like even in your body language, you said it's men and women. Like you say men and women. Like your body language subconsciously was like this, right? So if things are at an extreme, you kind of have to swing the other way for a period of time for things to kind of balance out. Right? I've heard that argument before, and like
that.
At first, my reaction to it was kind of like, I don't know, maybe you kind of have to like slowly. You know, you can teach people, you can have multiple conversations and whatnot. And like, I find that often, you know, people model on oppression and they don't even know it's oppression they're modeling, right? And that's kind of like what we're talking about. Like, how do you perceive love, right? And one of the notes we made is men perceive love one way, women perceive love another way. But really, like, men are perceiving love and women are receiving oppression. Right? So it's like, what's the balance there, bro?
Right?
Like,
there's no balance. There's no balance. It's
so
like
you really do have to send that shit swinging the other way. Right?
Absolutely.
You have to with brutal force educate people with like. That's my position now, right? I'm almost like militant about it, just based on like. I mean, a lot of times we've talked about this, like, some of this, coming up with this was so traumatic for, I can't speak for you, but for me, because it's like, I've done that.
Asking some very hard
questions. I've been that guy for so long, like, what, and I think it really has to, like, we're talking about here, has to aggressively go the other way, especially for the people that are coming up, because you're saying, like, we lose that opportunity of growth, right? Because you spend all this time on learning, you really could have just been growing naturally from default, right? So that's just what I'm taking what you were saying.
So I want to like ask as we wrap up now is like that, like this language that we're talking about, that we're learning as young black men here, young African, young Nigerian men, is like how do we want to change how we communicate it, understanding that communication is not just speaking, it's speaking with the intentionality that this person I'm talking to understands me, and that like I'm also speaking to them in the way that they understand, right? Like it's not just, I'm not just speaking English to you because I want to. I know you understand English. In an accent, I know you understand. In a dialect, I know you understand. If I started speaking like, where's this place in Canada? Oh my God, Nova Scotia. Like where their accent is so different, like you wouldn't grab now. So like, how do you want to be consistent with that going forward? Is my question.
Right. I'll go first, I guess. So, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, because like for you to even mention those things about like speaking in like the right language, speaking the right accent and dialect and all that stuff, it's like there is some work on your part that has already been done to like actually go in and like actually find out what is the right language, what is all this, right? There's a lot of learning that needs to happen. And I think we need to be willing to expose ourselves to that reception of knowledge, because again, it's like with the change of perception and like how we see things, like men are trash, like, you know, the person that I was in the beginning of that is not who I am now. There's a constant growth and a constant learning and the, you know, change of opinions, and you have to be willing. And I think that is like the key part. It's like you need to be willing to invest in actually learning these things and like changing your behavior and like seeing things differently. I think platforms like this are excellent for like, you know, doing exactly that, like making it accessible to people. But it has to be a conscious decision on the part of the person who is honestly at fault to like recognize these things and like try to change. So there's definitely like a huge aspect of like learning that needs to go on there. And I think it's like, just willingness to to again make that sacrifice to be better for somebody else, you need to actually be willing to do that. And yeah, it's a huge part of that.
Thoughts?
I would just say, like, learn how to put your ego to the side. Because I think if you're in a place where you're communicating, there's already somebody else in that space. And if you're leading with ego, you're not hearing anything. That's my personal challenge.
Okay.
My personal challenge, right? So when I hear you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. Like sometimes I'm speaking in my language and my language alone. Whether you understand it or not, it's your problem. You know, I've said what I said. Figure it out. And that's really just leading with ego. So if like, and then obviously I catch myself. You know, I remember that this is somebody that I like, enjoy, and it's like okay, but you know that takes practice, right? So it's to find a way to not lead with ego or with a bruised ego, maybe, or with a hurt ego, like an ego that thinks that they're better than, or like all of that. You know, but
yeah, it's definitely a lot of like self-reflection and like willingness to accept the facts, because I think that reminds me of when you first you had like an Instagram poll one time talking about like how do we create safe spaces for Black women, and I said something like, you know, we need to create unsafe spaces for for misogynistic or like, you know, Black men in the sense of like because if you want to live in this like delusory reality that like you're never really wrong, it's the same way you go out and you call a white person or you say like white people are racist and they're like defensive, like no, this is not true, this doesn't exist, you're making this whole thing up. I feel like a lot of like Black men are in denial of the fact that like there is a huge element of misogyny and patriarchy that we are all dealing with as men in general, but even as Black men specifically, it's different. It's like it exists in its own form. And the first step to that is like that acceptance that like this is actually a serious issue that actually does exist. Seeing it being spoken about and being willing to accept it and like learn from it is a huge part of that. But that doesn't exist if we keep lying to ourselves that it's not an issue or it's not a problem. So the first step is acceptance and then like willingness to like actually change, again, like going back to those same themes, right? So I think that is like a definitely huge part of it. Just like coming forward and saying like, stop being hung up on, oh, I don't like when, because like Twitter is kind of ridiculous, again, going back to Twitter, because like you see people complaining about things like, like whenever a woman comes out and complains about something serious as like sexual assault or like feeling unsafe in, you know, around Black men, somebody will come out and say, oh, gender wars. And it's like completely ridiculous things to say, because it's like, here's somebody like expressing a reality, a truth that is actually their own lived experience. They have every right to do so, and they're justified because what they're saying, we know it to be fact. Like, people like to play dumb. Like, we know that this is actually a thing that goes on. It's actually a thing that happens. But it's like, are we so caught up in like our own egos that we're like, no, I'm just gonna deny this entire thing? Or are we gonna like go forward and like, you know, actually learn from that and do better? So it's definitely a decision that needs to be made, but also a recognition of the problem itself, and like stop trying to be so offended by the fact that the conversations are happening and like rather just jump in and participate.
Sorry for those random sounds. Sorry for the calls. You have to be willing to participate. You don't want to hear a woman's point of view and immediately label it gender wars, because it sounds like a defensive mechanism to immediately to dismiss it and minimize the problem so that it doesn't shed light on the parts of you that probably like empower that oppression, right? Like dog, like, are you really willing to shed light on it? Like, I mean, it's gonna suck, right? It's gonna be painful, because like it means that you have to like be willing to like look at yourself in a different light. And there was a question that we had, and I'm going to just turn it from a question into a statement. You know, like, has anyone watched Lovecraft Country? Or County or Country? Country. The main actor's dad, who ended up being gay, right? But he had hid it for so long. Yeah. And towards the end of the season, he talks about having to, you know, forget parts of himself in order to be this dude's father. Like, he had to hide tender, soft parts of himself to be a man. And like, I wonder if you like reverse that, and it's like, what parts of this man are you willing to forget? This men that we are right now, that society has upheld, what parts of those men are we willing to forget, so that like we can start to speak differently, we can start to listen better, and like again put aside ego. Those like I don't want us to answer that, but like that's a question to everybody listening, right? Like what parts of yourself are you really willing to forget and like to push aside for the sake of better relationships, like better communication, like a more effective you, right? Like a better, like for the world, so that 50 years down the line we're not still having this exact same conversation. So that the same way we say, you know, America has made pictures from civil rights movement black and white to make it seem so like long ago, where there's people who are still alive today, but they don't want it to seem that way. They want to make it seem ancient. Like we don't want to be doing that in like I don't want someone to take this tape and play it in cassette so that it seems ancient. It's not ancient, right? Like, we talked about this in 2020, fam. Like, and I understand the change takes time, but like, what parts of you are you willing to forget? That's it. That's it for me. Thank you so much, Marcus.
Thanks for having me.
Yo, great conversation. Thank you, Folarin. Thank you, S behind the camera. This is like the end of the season.
Yeah. And we're drinking.
This is the end of the season. Thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate all the vulnerability, all the honesty. The reason why we do this is so that people that look like us and live similar lives to us, like, hear these experiences from us. You know, that was the main reason why this was started. Rest in peace, Tony Salawu. This came because of the violence that took her life, right? Like, and that really, really made me angry. Like, that made me want to forget the part of myself that wanted to brush that away, right? Like, so that I could just be like, nah, it didn't really happen, because like now it means I have to start like focusing on the violence towards black women, and that means like I have to have these conversations. That means you have to set it up, but like we did it, right? Like, because I don't want that to be an excusable action anymore within my sphere of change, at least, you know. So yeah, thank you guys, man. I really, really appreciate the journey, and you guys for coming along with it. Have a great night. Cut it there.